ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in the audience. Welcome to today's panel where we'll speak about the global race to protect the digital youth. My name is Sarah Brandstetter, and I'm a tech journalist at the news outlet MLEX in Brussels, where I cover data protection and platform regulation, of which the whole issue or topic of protection of minors online is a really big part and very high on the political agenda. Let me start with saying that I think most decision makers and companies, if not all, would agree on the statement that the protection of children and young users online is really important and has become a priority for many of them. However, I think when it comes to the question of how this should be achieved, the debate gets started. Over the past few years, we've seen regulators aimed at driving systemic change, combating illegal and harmful content online, and protecting young users better. Notably, there's the UK's Online Safety Act and the EU's Digital Services Act, both at which impose new duties on platforms to improve user safety. But those are just some parts of the whole puzzle. And also across the globe, in different jurisdictions, lots more is happening. So I'm really happy that we have three experts with me here today to discuss this timely question. Let me introduce them. First, we have Luisa Sato, who's a partner at Tosini Fredi in Sao Paulo, where she advises Brazilian international clients on data protection, digital law, and IP. She regularly works on complex compliance and governance issues at the intersection of privacy, technology, and regulation. Thanks for being here. We have Stephen Matthias, who's a partner at Kocher & Co., where he heads the firm's Bangalore office and co-chairs the technology law practice. He brings a comparative perspective shaped by experience in India, the UK, and the EU, and is advising on technology regulation and data protection. Hi, Stephen. And third, we have Carla Guimont, who's a senior legal counsel and data protection officer for France at the video game publisher and developer Ubisoft, where she's been working as data protection officer for the past 7 years. In her work, she's focused a lot on minor protection and the digital gaming environments. Hi, Carla. Thanks so much for being with us. And since we have here experts from three different parts of the world, let's get started with a bit of a global overview. And let me start with the debate in Brazil is really high on the agenda at the moment on this topic. So maybe to this international audience that we have here today, can you give us a brief outline on the Brazilian framework and also what you see as its key policy choice compared to what's happening here in Europe?
Sure, Sarah. It is a big pleasure for me to be here with you on this very special day. So, in September this last year, Brazil enacted a new framework for the protection of children and adolescents in digital environments. It is known as the Digital ECA, which is an acronym in Portuguese for Statute of the Child and Adolescent. It enters into force only March this year, a few days from now, and it complements both the LGPD, which is the Brazilian General Data Protection Law, and updates existing child protection rules for the digital context. This law was the result of regulatory evolution combined with strong social pressure, so the legislative process was significantly accelerated by intense public and media attention. This was triggered by viral content published by a well-known influencer here in Brazil, exposing the risks of child exploitation and harmful content on digital platforms. What is particularly interesting is that the debate reached an unusual level of political consensus here in Brazil. So voices from across the political spectrum was aligned, far right, far left. And as a result, online child safety became a top public priority, pretty much like what we have seen in Europe. So the new framework will apply when there is a sufficiently high probability of use or appeal to children and adolescents, ease of access and use by that population, and a significant degree risk to privacy, safety, or biopsychosocial development. With this legislation, Brazil joins a growing group of jurisdictions that have adopted a dedicated legal framework for the processing of children's data. But unlike some international proposals, Brazil does not ban, for instance, social media for minors. There are specific obligations regarding the matter, such as accounts of users up to 16 years old must be linked to a parent's or legal guardian's account. Also, similar to the European approach, Brazil shifts the burden of age verification onto the platforms themselves rather than relying solely on parental responsibility. But there's also an important structural difference from the EU. So Brazil is a big continental size country, but it is only one country. So this avoids the challenges Europe faces in harmonizing interpretations across multiple member states. Finally, Brazil did not create a completely separate children's data protection regime. This did not happen. Instead, it chose to strengthen the principle of the best interests of the child within its existing data protection, consumer protection, and minors protection frameworks.
Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you so much, Luisa. That's really interesting also to hear about this consensus, because at the moment, the debate in Europe and also what's coming from different member states, for example, isn't really like that. So there are lots of different approaches to it. So now let me jump to Stephen. How would you characterize India's approach to this whole issue of protecting minors online and also processing of children's data? And also, how or where does it diverge from the EU model?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. The first thing we need to know is that India does not have a comprehensive data privacy law that's in force at the moment. We did have the DPDPA, which was enacted in 2023, and the government a few months ago notified when the law will come into force, and it will actually come into force in May of 2027. The government has given an 18-month period for businesses to comply. Now, that 18-month period, the government is considering reducing that to 12 months, but hasn't done that yet. So the date for compliance is still May of 2027. Under the new law, the a child is defined as a person who's not completed 18 years of age. So 18 years is a fairly high bar compared to the rest of the world. Um, the controller has to obtain verifiable consent of the parent of a child before processing personal data of a child. Significantly, there seem to be some gap here in the sense there does not seem to be an obligation to verify whether a user is a child or not. Um, of course, that's a very difficult thing to do when there's no self-declaration that by the user that the user is a child. Um, there's a general prohibition on undertaking any processing that's likely to cause a detrimental harm to the children. But leaving aside the consent requirement, there is a requirement that a controller cannot undertake tracking or behavioral monitoring of children or targeted advertising directed at children. This is probably the most controversial part of this law. Now, the government can exempt certain processing from from the requirement of consent, and also this prohibition on tracking, behavioral monitoring, targeted advertising, and so on. So there are some categories that the government has notified under its rules. So the first category are really, uh, healthcare, education, childcare, and so on. And processing here really relates to health services, educational activity, and safety. So, for example, a child is going through transportation, then you want to track where the child is, so that would be fine because it's safety issue. Then there's another category which covers really three types. So one is exercise of power under the law, and providing government subsidies. So that's mostly relating to the government. Then having a user account and communicating by email, so that is actually permitted, um, including real-time location for safety. And then the third one is verifying age itself and preventing access to harmful content. So you can track a use of a child accessing content in order to make sure that the child is not accessing content that's harmful, that's like age inappropriate and so on. Now, in terms of verifiable consent, there are really two requirements. One is using appropriate technical and organizational measures to obtain consent, and the second one is due diligence to check that person identifying as a parent is an adult. So the I guess there are two parts to it. One is the consent part, and one is the prohibition on tracking and monitoring. As regards the consent goes, um, India has some unique kind of tools. So we have, what's called DigiLocker. The government's proposing to use tokenization, and then we have Aadhaar verification, where essentially you have a biometric-based identification that pretty much everybody in the country has. So once a child declares that X is the parent, then you can use the Aadhaar method. Is an SMS will come to the parent. The parent has to put in a one-time password, and that gets verified by the Aadhaar authentication system, and that's a form of consent. So that may not be as hard as it seems because of the fact that India has these new age kind of tools. But I think the bigger one is on advertising and behavioral monitoring, particularly when it comes to content. So you're using YouTube or Netflix, and you want to recommend to a child that perhaps you can try this program or watch this content, then that might not actually be permitted under this new law.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for this very comprehensive overview. And now let me go to Carla before we'll talk a bit more about this whole age verification question. So, Carla, we just heard from Brazil and India. Also, I talked a bit about the European framework before. So, I'm really wondering how Ubisoft, as a global company, is handling this kind of patchy situation of child safety laws across the globe.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thanks for having me. So to answer your question, indeed, when you are a global company like Ubisoft, the legal framework is very fragmented. So concretely, our approach is based on three main principles. First, we have a common global foundation built on the highest standard of protection. In practice, this often means putting the best interest of the child as a primary consideration. Second, we adapt our practices with local specificities. So some countries go further, so we make the necessary adjustments. The goal is to meet all local requirements without creating completely different experiences for players around the world. So if I take a concrete example, in the US, COPA requires a verifiable parental consent, and this is something we have implemented as a local requirement. And third, we focus on anticipation. Protection has become a major priority. So we don't just think about compliance today, we also think about the future. What will authorities expect next? How can we design systems that can evolve over time without having to rebuild everything every year? So in practice, it means strong internal governance and close collaboration between legal and operational teams.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you plan ahead for sure. I would really like to talk a bit more about this whole question of age verification and data processing now with the three of you. because it's really one pressure point globally when it comes to child protection and kind of this question where it collides with privacy, cybersecurity, and also AI. So maybe we continue with Carla. Can you share a bit more in detail what's Ubisoft's approach to this topic and protecting young players online and also finding this right balance between collecting and protecting their data?
Yes, sure. So at Ubisoft, our approach to protecting young players online is really about finding this right balance, enabling a great and safe gaming experience while collecting only the data that is strictly necessary. So you mentioned age assurance. We are seeing that authorities are asking companies to go beyond simply asking players to declare their age, including in the gaming industry. So we are exploring solutions. We know that odd identifier like ID documents or payment methods are reliable, but involve collecting sensitive data. So it can raise privacy and security issues. Other methods like automated age verification can reduce data collection and still provide sufficient accuracy. So we are investigating to find a solution that is effective, minimize data collection, and remain respectful of the player experience. And on top of age assurance, we have already implemented in our systems age appropriate accounts with protective settings by default and parental controls. So how this works in practice, we have two main types of accounts. The first one, child accounts, for players between 7 and the local age of consent. These accounts are highly protected and linked to a parent or legal guardian account from the start. And the second, teen account, for players from the local age of consent up to 18 years old. And on this account, we have two layers of protection, protective settings and parental controls. So first, we apply protective settings by default. For example, profile visibility is limited, social interactions are restricted, in-game purchases are blocked, no content personalization or marketing communications are sent by default. And then we provide parents with concrete parental controls. So they can adjust spending limits, chat restriction, and friends lists. They also receive monthly reports and real-time notifications for certain events, such as purchases or friend requests. So by protecting minors, we really build trust with our users and their parents, which is so important to support our success. And talking about trust, it also comes from a fundamental pillar of privacy, which is transparency. So in addition to this minors account, we developed a simplified version of our privacy policy designed to be understood by everyone. So we use clear, plain language. We focus on a visual that is appealing for minors. We tested the document with real users, including minors. So normally we test our games with playtesters, and this time we get their feedback on our legal documents, and it was very interesting. So the goal was really to focus on what is really important for them, make sure they understand what we do with their data, help them know their rights and exercise them. So in short, our approach combined age-appropriate accounts, protective settings, parental controls, and we focus on transparency.
Thanks so much, Carla. Turning now to Luisa, maybe if you have any reactions to what Carla said and what they are doing, that would be great to hear. And then also more specifically for Brazil, I know you wanted to share some kind of best practices from the Data Protection Authority with us.
Sure. So I loved listening to Carla speak because it seems like Ubisoft really checked all the boxes for our new law. It seems like Ubisoft would be a role model for the law. So this is incredible work, Carla. You should be really proud of your company. Under our new law, companies are expected to operationalize compliance, focusing on key actions, many of them already mentioned by Carla, but mapping the processing activities involving minors. I think this would be a number one topic because after that, you can choose what you're going to do with that. Reviewing legal basis under our data protection law with special attention to parental consent mechanisms, updating privacy notices and user interfaces to ensure that information is clear, it is age appropriate, it is easily accessible to both children and their parents, implementing or reviewing age verification mechanisms, and always applying data minimization and proportionality, implementing, Carla said that also, parental supervision and control tools whenever that's applicable. In many cases, it is not. Conducting impact assessments. I think Carla also covered that. And also, very important, training the teams. This is specific in our law. We also have sector-specific obligations for instance, for social media platforms, for electronic games like Ubisoft, and online art advertising. And yes, you're right, Sarah. I would like to mention that our DPA did a tremendous job. They published a big study on age verification, and it collected experiences from all over the world. And I think, although that's not really mandatory for companies in Brazil, we can expect a lot of that to be part of the new regulation. It is important to mention, I don't know if I did this before, that the same authority that it is responsible for enforcing the data protection law, the ANPD, is also in charge of enforcing the digital ECA. So throughout this year, the authority will issue specific regulation on all and on everything that we said today. And on this comprehensive study on age verification in digital environments, we can expect this to base a regulation on the matter. It also serves already as a valuable reference for companies preparing their compliance strategies.
Thank you so much, Luisa. And now, Stephen, after you've heard all of this from Luisa, but also from Carla, generally speaking, what's your advice now to a company that currently processes some kind of children's data? What should they do now? I mean, I'm guessing what Carla said, like planning ahead and looking ahead what could happen, would be a very good first step.
Thanks, Sarah. Firstly, I'd like to say I think Ubisoft is doing a great job on this, and it's I really like to compliment on them on that. And also, what the Brazilian authority is doing with a worldwide kind of survey, I think that's also really great. I'd actually like to read that survey. I'm sure it'll be very useful for me as well. I think, because the law has not yet come into force, everyone's fairly at the starting stage in India. And I think the unique tools we have here can be useful for Indian companies. So one other that I thought I would mention is the law actually provides for consent managers. Now, it's not like other countries don't allow consent managers. It's just that the law in India specifically provides for it and also has the obligation for a consent manager to actually get, registered. So, for those who find the whole consent mechanism, whether for adults or for children, difficult, then using a consent manager would definitely be the way forward. The different tools available like DigiLocker and Aadhaar and so on could be fairly easy ways in which Indian companies can obtain verifiable consent for children. Uh, um, and the technology is all available. I think Aadhaar by and large has not been used by the private sector very much. It's used extensively in government services. So, I sit on the boards of many companies of my clients, particularly foreign companies that are just set up in India, and I'm constantly getting what we call OTP, other one-time passwords that are Aadhaar based because I'm the director on the board for verification, and those are government services. So I think we can very much move that to the private sector as well.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm just checking if we have some questions from the audience, and I do see one, so I'll read it out to all three of you. How do you reconcile conflicting best interests of the child standards across borders? So, who wants to take that? Would be interesting to hear from the three of you. Luisa, maybe you have any thoughts on it?
Sure. So, what I would do, I would adopt what I already do with data protection issues in general. So, whenever we have an issue that covers different countries, we usually tell our client to adopt possibly uh, uh, the most conservative standard applicable in all of those jurisdictions. But of course, this will the company will have to use a risk-based assessment. So that would also be important to do, possibly an assessment on this matter. But in all cases, adopting the highest standard would be the most conservative approach, in my opinion.
Is this something that you're doing, Carla? I know we talked a bit about in the beginning, but like adopting the most conservative approach everywhere. I think you also talked about having different set of rules depending on the location, right?
Yes, sure. And I think that it's not necessarily in conflict with business, because I think this is a lot what we can think. Putting the best interest of the child can be a limit to the business, but that's what I was saying. Trust is so important, and in the gaming sector, even more. Players needs to be confident with what we are doing with their data, and it helps also engaging them. So yes, putting the best interest of the child, building minors account and all the protective measures helps also the business and the trust.
Stephen,
Um,
any thoughts?
Yeah, I think here there's a trade-off between two approaches. One being the take the most conservative approach versus we'll adapt country-wise. The first one means there's probably an easier fix, but it does mean that you're being more conservative and narrower in countries where you don't need to be, because there may be some few outlier countries that are very strict. On the other hand, if you do it the other way, then you spend a lot more effort and time on technology in having different standards for different countries. But then you're able to comply in all countries, and you're able to use have greater flexibility and freedom in countries where the law is more liberal.
And I see we have one more question here, specifically for Carla. So, from your experience, how do governance and international coordination influence a company's ability to respond to enforcement risk in the area of child protection online?
Yes, so from my experience, governance and internal coordination are really key when managing a big project like minor protection online. This is not something a single team can handle alone. Multiple teams are involved: legal, security, online product, marketing, customer support. And if all the teams don't collaborate from the start, regulatory requirements are often addressed too late, reactively instead of proactively. And we know it's much better to handle this from the beginning. And in practice, this coordination goes through regular meetings, shared roadmaps, and priorities that we define together. And this approach not only makes the project successful, it also makes the work motivating and interesting, in my opinion. I learned a lot from seeing how other teams approach the same challenges. And I think another important point is training teams. The DPO team help other teams understand privacy and minor protection issues. And by training them, compliance becomes a natural part of how we work. It helps teams spot risk earlier, ask the right question, and design stronger solutions. So strong governance and coordination improve also our ability to respond to regulators. Decisions are documented and teams can clearly explain not just what was done, but why and how. So, in short, governance, coordination, and training are essential. They let us anticipate risks and show concretely that child protection is built into our decisions.
Thank you so much, Carla. I think this is a perfect note to end this panel, a call for cooperation on a topic I think that will stay with us for much longer, and there will be more questions to answer. Thanks so much to the audience, to everyone listening, and to the three speakers here sharing your expertise.